Howdy, folks, and welcome to Moose Podcast 290. Here we are into May already. Wow, I can't believe it. Especially where I'm at in Montana. Coldest April in the last 70 years. So even though some things are saying it's time for spring, the temperature says, yeah, not yet. But I hope it's warm and just gorgeous where you're at. I sure want to thank you, and I appreciate all that you have been doing this past week. I've heard from many of you. Some of you got your Z800 f6.3 from Bedford's this week. Yeah, it's exciting. Can't wait to hear from you what you think of that bad boy. What a great lens. I'm very excited that you've got it and it's out. I trust you're out there making some great images with it. But thanks for supporting the Moose Podcast, thinking of me, and stopping on by. Also want to thank those folks at Bedford's Camera, bedfords.com. Like I mentioned, some of you got the Z800 from them this week. I know the Z9s are going as fast as they come in, as well as the rest of the gear. Besides gear, they've got great resources, both incredible salespeople, very knowledgeable, and all that online and in-person training. So make sure you stop by bedfords.com. Remember to use the Moose discount. For a bunch of you who say you forgot, let them know. They'll take care of you. I've never met anybody more stand-up than the folks there at Bedford's Camera. So thank you, Bedfords, for all you do and for sponsoring the Moose Podcast. Let me get right into this week's episode. Strategy, wildlife photography. Yeah, as you might guess, I'm going to do a couple of these on different topics. Mainly because, even though I have such a limited audience, I'm hoping that I can affect a few of you into getting involved with what I'm talking about, and then can just keep spreading. I read the books, plural, by Rick McIntyre about wolves in Yellowstone. And I'm here to tell you, he had horror stories after horror stories about photographers. I just spent a really delightful week at Maggie Marsh. Talked to one of the powers to be there, and again heard more horror stories about photographers. Now I keep mentioning what I see myself in the field, and it's gotta stop. I mean, there's a reason why my creed has always been no photograph is worth sacrificing the welfare of a subject. But it's getting to the point where photographers, besides the egregious things they're doing harming critters, they are, those few are going to ruin it for the rest of us in so many locations. We're not talking about just Yellowstone or Maggie Marsh. We are talking about most of the places that we love to go as the public to photograph critters, to follow our passion. And we're screwing it up, man, point blank. Now, photographers aren't the only one, all right? They're not. But the problem is, they tend to be the loudest, or the most obvious, or they stick out. So they're the ones that are targeted. They're the ones that are seen. They're the ones who are, mentioned in the reports. So, strategy, wildlife photography. Like I mentioned, first, no photograph is worth sacrificing the welfare of the subject. None. Not one, period. Not one single click is worth it. Now, how do you avoid that? Well, that's what we're going to talk about when we're talking about strategies. I want to start with asking each and every one of you who's a wildlife photographer, or any photographer, any genre, what is the end, means, or use, or desire for that photograph? I ask that question, and I mean it in all sincerity, because I see wildlife photographers all too often do egregious things to take a photograph, which in all honesty is just going to turn out to be pure crap. How do I know that? Well, when you're shooting and the light sucks and you're miles away and then you chase something down to close up that distance, you've got still sucky light. You still have an animal that is being stressed because it's being chased. And if you don't know those first two things, that the light sucks and the animal's being stressed, there are really huge odds that the final thing, the photograph, is going to suck. I mean, a really simple way to know that you should stop is when you start feeling frustrated or the image size is too small or you're in this panic mode. And I'll explain what I call panic photography in a second. These are all signs that the final photograph isn't worth putting that critter at risk. When the light is gorgeous and the critters are coming to you, there's a lot that's going on there. All of it's coming from you, the photographer. When you see that light as being gorgeous, that is a sign to yourself and every other photographer that you kind of have an idea what's going on. That's important. Now, when the critter is coming to you, that's another sign that you're understanding some basic biology. Not talking PhD here. Some basic biology. And you're letting the critters go about their life, and in that process, for lack of better terms, accepting your presence while they go about that life, and then share with you that struggle for survival. I'm going to use Maggie Marsh as an example here, because I just came from there. Maggie Marsh is this marvelous place that Mother Nature, back in August, decided it was going to level. It leveled about 70% of the 3 acres on the boardwalk. Trees are no longer vertical or horizontal. Finding out some information, digging down, there happened to an area, this wind damage, about a dozen years ago, a little bit further east. Another excellent place for seeing all these different birds on migration. In that location, there was, and there still is, research going on, and they had it prior to and after the wind damage. And they found that the migrant birds, the numbers and the variety continued. That really wasn't damaged by the forest coming down. What did change was the makeup of the resident birds that stayed and nested. So it's not really hard to translate that data over to Maggie and realize it's still going to be a great place for migrants. It's just going to change who sticks around and nests. Now, what are the migrants doing when they come to Maggie Marsh? And this is important to understand for so many locations throughout North America. When critters are on migration, be it mammals like elk or sheep or moose, other animals, they migrate sometimes just down slope, but what they're looking for is calories. They need those calories in, calories out. And for birds, it's a really big deal. I was really excited, for example, to photograph for the first time. I actually got glass on a veery. The veery is a small bird, a little bit smaller than your fist, kind of sulks around the forest floor. It's kind of that color camo. It's got real character, though. I really like that veery. And it's spelt like something I would spell, Veery. I mean, I can do those kind of, typos. I'm all over this bird. And this bird, it flies all the way down the south end of South America and comes back flying only at night when it migrates. And it's coming through, hits Maggie Marsh to fuel up as it continues north. It's there just to put on some fat reserves so it can continue its migration. If it's chased, harassed, kept from feeding by photographers dying to get a photograph, you are literally putting that bird, that individual, at risk of not succeeding on its mission to raise the next generation. I mean, that's a really small, example. But it's really important to understand that if you wait and let the bird come to you, it is already comfortable with your presence. It's already feels comfortable doing what it needs to do to survive. And for you, the photographer, it's probably going to give you the opportunity to see it longer. And if you're at Maggie, you know that seeing any bird for very long is really a treasure because they're just constantly going chasing those little insects. So that Varia is going to stop, work its way. You watch where it's going, its point of travel. You feed that speck of beautiful light. You set up, pre-focus on it, take a deep breath and wait. And then if it all works out, it lands there, boom, you get the shot. He's there for a couple of seconds. He keeps on going, but you still have the photograph. And more importantly, you've not, in the bigger picture, made us wildlife photographers look like an idiot. You've not harassed critters. You've not kept them from their main goal of feeding. You have done everything as a wildlife photographer you should be doing, except for one thing. And the one thing that probably irks me the most about this whole scenario is these photographers are out there. Oh, God. Rick's stories about photographers harassing wolves are just freaking unbelievable. And here's the deal. Just like he says, they go through all this horrible stuff and doing just egregious things, and you never see the photographs. What the hell's with that? I mean, seriously, if you're going to go through all that and you're risking the welfare of the subject, you're trampling endangered plants, you are creating paths for predators to find your subject that you think is so important, and you take the picture and what? It goes into a hard drive and collects dust? What's the purpose? I don't get it. Why do you go through all that? I mean all of that. Spending the money, going these places, being total jerks to our environment, creating and burning bridges, burning bridges for photographers coming behind you, creating more problems for a photograph you don't share? I don't understand that. So when it comes to a strategy for wildlife photography, I want you to start and embrace some basic biology knowledge. It really doesn't take long anymore. You don't have to go like when I started out back in the late 70s or 80s, going to a research library where you couldn't even take the books home. You had to sit there and read them in front of the librarian because they're, were hard to find. This information right now is at your fingertip. Seriously, a simple example. There's an app. It's free, right? Free. Means you don't pay anything. It's called Merlin, like the wizard or like the little raptor. And it uses your iPhone or smartphone, it uses the speaker, it listens, and it will tell you what birds are in the vicinity. Literally, it listens to the calls, and it tells you who is in the vicinity. So if you see like yellow-throated warbler or magnolia warbler or blue-gray gnatcatcher, you know these little thumb-sized birds are coming your way. You got to get close physically, which means you've got to find where they're going to feed. And then you can, all this technology's out there. It's really not hard for any wildlife photographer to spend 5 seconds to do some basic learning. Now, I'm not suggesting that you need to see every bird and say, that's that, call out all these species. I'm not talking about that. Taking the photograph, making the best possible photograph, and then IDing it later when you get back to the computer, 100% valid. What I am saying is you learn that if you're going to, in this example with Maggie Marsh, go to photograph migratory birds, you realize they need insects, which means they need some heat and no wind. And with that combination, the insects start popping, the birds start doing their thing. They come through in pulses because they are migrating and they're feeding, taking those calories. So one of the better strategies is that if you park, and biology will tell you this when you start reading basic biology, you'll see that biologists, when they're trying to figure out who is in the area, besides using something like Merlin now, they stop. And for the first 10 minutes, they don't do anything. They don't start counting because it takes a minimum of 10 minutes for your presence and your disturbance your presence creates to kind of like the shock wave to go through the forest, and then they get over it. Then they start doing their thing again. And then if you wait just 10 minutes, which I know for a lot of photographers, because I see it, waiting for a second, let alone 10 minutes. Oh, must seem like a lifetime, but you park and you wait at least 10 minutes. You'd be so surprised how many birds come right up to you and say, oh, hello, and go, they just do their thing. You don't need a ton of glass to get photographs of something that comes right up to you. I'm talking at Maggie Marsh, 3, 4, maybe 5 feet away. They're right next to you. You just need a lens that focuses close. In this last trip, I used the 180 to 400 because when I took the 800, its minimum focusing distance of 16 feet means anything closer than 16 feet, I couldn't photograph. I lost a lot of great opportunities. So now with the 180 to 400 at 400 millimeters with the 1.6, I'm at 560, focusing at 6 feet, that little dude the size of your thumb fills the image frame. This is not rocket science, but this is our world. The wild heritage that we inherited is in trouble. It's upon us to do a number of things. 1, treasure it, protect it, be its guardian, be its champion. 2, when we're out there as photographers, be good stewards of this wild heritage. We were so bloody fortunate to be left to enjoy. 3, it is to take those photographs and share them every single bloody way you possibly can. Enlighten those who are not as fortunate as us to go out and see it. And 2, give those who are in love with this more fuel for their passion to carry on the mission of trying to save the wild heritage we have. There's this horrible, egregious number out there of something like 70 billion birds in North America that have disappeared, gone completely the last few decades. Can you understand that number? It's with a B. It's just overwhelming. So I'm going to leave you with this note. If John Muir didn't have the foresight to save Yosemite Valley, we would not have it today to enjoy. The question is, do we have the foresight to save what we have today for future generations? As wildlife photographers, don't be part of the problem. Be part of the solution. You guys have a great week. And remember to make every click your story.